There is a version of you that the world sees, and there is a version of you that feels like you. Most people assume these two are the same. They aren't. One of the most unsettling ideas in psychology is that what you call me may not actually be who you are. It may be a carefully constructed interface, a psychological mask, a role you learned to perform so early, so thoroughly, that you forgot it was a performance. Carl Jung called this mask the persona. Not in the modern sense of branding, not a social media identity, but a psychological structure that forms between your inner world and the demands of society. A bridge, a translator, a filter. Necessary, useful, but dangerous when mistaken for the self. Because when you identify with the persona, your life begins orbiting around maintenance. Maintenance of an image. Maintenance of a role. Maintenance of a version of you that once helped you survive, but may now be slowly suffocating who you actually are. Most people never realize this is happening. They just feel a quiet sense of dislocation, a low-level anxiety, a vague sense that something is off, that they're living a life that looks correct, but doesn't feel true. They blame burnout, they blame circumstances, they blame other people. Rarely do they consider the deeper possibility, that they are loyal to a character they created, not to themselves. The persona does not begin as deception. It begins as adaptation. When you are young, you quickly learn a crucial lesson. Certain ways of being receive approval. Certain ways of being receive rejection. You notice what gets smiles, what gets praise, what gets attention, what gets you left alone. Slowly, unconsciously, you start shaping yourself around those responses. Maybe being quiet kept you safe, so you became the calm one. Maybe being funny earned connection, so you became the humorous one. Maybe being responsible gained approval, so you became the reliable one. Maybe being strong stopped criticism, so you became the tough one. None of this is conscious. A child doesn't say, "I will now construct a persona." They simply adapt. They form a behavioral pattern that works, and because it works, they repeat it. And because they repeat it, it becomes familiar. And because it becomes familiar, it begins to feel like identity. This is where the confusion starts. The persona is not fake. It is real behavior. But it is partial behavior. It is a slice of you, optimized for acceptance, not a full representation of your inner world. Think of it like this. The persona is not who you are. It is who you learned you are allowed to be. That distinction changes everything. Over time, the persona becomes polished, refined, reinforced by feedback. People respond to you as if that role is you. They describe you using those traits. They expect consistency. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to experience pressure to stay in character. You feel discomfort when you deviate, guilt when you express something that doesn't match the image, fear when you sense that your true impulses might disrupt the version of you others recognize. This is the moment where a useful adaptation becomes a psychological prison, because now you're no longer using the persona. The persona is using you. You start making decisions based not on what you feel, but on what aligns with your identity. You choose careers that fit the image, relationships that reinforce the role, lifestyles that preserve the narrative. You might say things like, "This just isn't me." But what you usually mean is, "This doesn't match the persona I'm invested in." Meanwhile, parts of you that don't fit quietly go underground. Anger, desire, creativity, need, curiosity, vulnerability, contradiction. They don't disappear. They simply lose conscious representation. Jung called these rejected parts the shadow. But before the shadow even becomes visible, the persona must be questioned. Because as long as you believe the mask is your identity, anything outside it feels wrong. Not unfamiliar, not undeveloped. Wrong. You don't say, "This part of me exists." You say, "That's not me." This internal rejection creates a subtle fragmentation. On the surface, you appear coherent, functional, put together. But internally, you feel strangely thin, flat, like you're living inside a narrow corridor of your own potential. Many people describe this as feeling hollow, not depressed, not actively miserable, just empty. Because emptiness is often what it feels like to live only in one dimension of yourself. The persona thrives on predictability. It prefers stable narratives, clear definitions, simple labels. I'm the ambitious one. I'm the caretaker. I'm the intellectual. I'm the rebel. But the psyche is not simple. It is contradictory, fluid, layered. You can be gentle and aggressive, secure and insecure, selfless and selfish, loving and resentful, creative and destructive. The persona simplifies this complexity into a digestible shape. That simplification is useful socially, but lethal psychologically if mistaken for wholeness. One of the earliest signs you're over-identified with your persona is chronic exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, existential exhaustion, the kind that sleep doesn't fix, because it's not your body that's tired. It's the constant self-monitoring, the subtle vigilance, the endless micro-adjustments. Am I coming across right? Was that too much? Was that too honest? Did I say the wrong thing? You may not hear these as words, but you feel them as tension, a background hum of self-regulation. Living as a persona requires effort, even if you're good at it, especially if you're good at it. Another sign is a strange dependency on external validation. If your identity is a role, then feedback becomes oxygen. Praise reassures you that the mask is working. Criticism feels annihilating, not because it's incorrect, but because it threatens the structure holding your sense of self together. You're not defending an opinion. You're defending your existence. This is why small comments can feel disproportionately painful. Why you replay interactions. Why you obsess over how you're perceived. It's not vanity. It's survival. If I am what I present, then losing the presentation feels like losing me. Jung warned that the more someone identifies with their persona, the more alienated they become from their inner life. They lose contact with instinct, with intuition, with genuine desire. They start living according to shoulds instead of wants, obligations instead of impulses, expectations instead of curiosity. Over time, this creates a split. The outer life becomes increasingly polished. The inner life becomes increasingly neglected. Until eventually, the psyche tries to correct the imbalance. Sometimes through depression, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through sudden life disruptions, breakdowns, midlife crises, burnout, addiction, obsessive fantasies, affairs, career implosions. These aren't random failures. They are often unconscious rebellions, the parts of you that were excluded from consciousness attempting to force their way back in, not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged. The tragedy is that most people respond by tightening the persona even further. They double down on control, on discipline, on image management. They treat the symptoms while ignoring the cause, which deepens the split. The work is not to eliminate the persona. Jung never advocated that. You need a persona. You live in society. You have roles. You have responsibilities. The danger is not having a mask. The danger is forgetting you're wearing one. Psychological maturity begins when you can hold this awareness. This is a role I play. It is not the totality of who I am. That single sentence creates space. Space between observer and behavior. Space between identity and expression. Space for complexity. Instead of asking, who am I? A better question becomes, what parts of me am I currently allowing to exist? That shift is subtle, but revolutionary. Because now identity becomes dynamic, not a fixed statue, but an evolving landscape. You begin noticing moments where you suppress something, moments where you perform, moments where you choose palatability over honesty, not to judge yourself, but to observe. Observation weakens unconscious identification. You don't need to tear the persona down. You need to see it. Seeing it creates choice. Choice restores agency. Agency restores aliveness. You may discover that beneath your calm persona lives a tremendous amount of anger. Beneath your strong persona lives grief. Beneath your nice persona lives assertiveness. Beneath your independent persona lives longing. None of these invalidate who you've been. They complete you. Wholeness is not becoming better. It is becoming more inclusive, more internally honest, less edited, less curated, more real. The paradox is that as you loosen identification with the persona, you often become more authentic socially, not less, because you're no longer acting from a script. You're responding from presence. You're not trying to be someone. You're allowing yourself to be. This doesn't mean you start saying everything you think, or acting on every impulse. Maturity is still discernment, but discernment guided by awareness, not fear of breaking character. The persona will always exist, but it should feel like clothing, not skin. You can wear different clothes in different situations, but you don't confuse your outfit with your body. When you stop mistaking the persona for yourself, something quiet but profound happens. You feel more solid, less performative, less brittle. You don't need to defend your identity constantly, because it's no longer a single fragile structure. It's a living system. You become harder to define and easier to be. And perhaps the most important realization, you were never broken. You were never empty. You were never missing anything. You were simply living inside a narrow version of yourself. And the moment you start questioning that version, the larger self begins to emerge. Not as a dramatic revelation, not as a sudden transformation, but as a slow return, a remembering, a gradual expansion into everything you've always been, but didn't think you were allowed to be.